You can draw this in Procreate. In this super easy tutorial, I'm going to show you how you can use photos of objects and turn them into fun doodles. I have linked the photos I'll be using in the description, so you can use the same, but after following this tutorial, of course, you can also find your own photos or create your own photos and turn those into doodles. Now for this tutorial, I'm working on a canvas that is 2,500 pixels by 2,500 pixels, but of course you can also work on a canvas that is a different size. In any case, I think creating doodles is super fun, so let's get started. We'll start off with something simple. I have this photo on the left, and we are going to create a doodle of this vase. Now, if you want your picture on the left or right, wherever, if you want your picture in a separate window on your iPad, what you can do is just slide up from the bottom of your screen and then drag your Photos app to the side, either to the left or to the right, depending on if you are left or right-handed, of course. So we have the picture here. I'm going to create a sketch first using the Bruni brush, which is part of the pencils, but of course you can use any sketching brush you like. And now we are just going to create a simple version of this vase, which is already pretty simple. Now my brush is set to 100% opacity. I have the size set to 25%. And that base of the vase is pretty much like a square. So you can just sketch that out and it'll have these rounded corners. So first you have a square, then you create these rounded corners. And then we have the top of the vase. And you can vary here a little bit. We're not going for an exact copy. So maybe your vase will have like a shorter top or maybe something that is longer. You can exaggerate, and you could even make multiple vases with this shape, but make them all a little bit different, and that'll change like the character of your vase. It'll make it look different. We have this rounded rectangle in the center, and for those reeds, I'm going to make them a little bit shorter. We can make a bit less, and you can just sketch out these tops. And maybe there's one like this. So just something like this. And of course, you can always just go to the Move and Transform tool, move your sketch around. I'm going to turn on magnetics. You can move it around, place it in the center. You could even make it bigger or smaller if that's necessary. And then let's also give it some character. We can give it a little face. You don't have to do this with your doodles, but I like giving them some character. So I'm making a curve and then a little tongue. And then these happy eyes. And then once you have this, you can lower the opacity of this layer by tapping the N, sliding to the left to, let's say, 30%, and then tap the plus for a new layer on top. And then for the brush, I'd like to go back to the classic library. So here we'll tap this little arrow down and back to libraries and go to the classic library. And then in the inking section, I'll use the dry ink brush. But of course, you can use any inking brush you like. I would highly encourage you to experiment with it. And for this brush, I'm just using black all the time, by the way, for my color. But of course, you can also vary with your colors. This brush is set to 100% opacity, and the size is set to 10%. And now you have your sketch, so you can just follow your sketch lines. And you can rotate your canvas to make it easier to follow the lines. And it doesn't have to be super tidy. This is a doodle. So don't worry if it's not super tidy. Really not necessary. We have the top and its center part. And then we'll go here, connect these lines. And then for those reeds, let's first just make these lines like this. Just something like this. We can make it a little bit thicker here. And then we'll just make these simple lines like this. You don't have to make this complicated. So just diagonal lines. And here as well. And then finally this one. And then of course our doodle needs a little face. So we'll follow that sketch. Add that tongue and those happy eyes. And then we can turn off that sketch layer by tapping the check mark. And then to add a bit more interest to our doodle, you can vary the line weight a little bit. For instance, we can make these lines a little bit thicker, like where it's the underside of the vase. So this is also an underside. Add some weight there. You can also add some dots to add the suggestion of some texture on the vase. So something like this. Then we can just create our next doodle in this same canvas, or you could make a new canvas, of course. I'm going to delete the sketch layer by sliding to the left and tapping delete, and then I'll just make a new layer on top. Turn this one off, and then go back to the Bruni brush in the other library. So I'll go here, go for the pencils for the Bruni brush, and then we'll go for this photo that I found at Unsplash. I thought it already has some nice character. So this is a great source of inspiration for a doodle. So first, again, just sketch out that shape. We have like a long rectangular shape for like its body. Then we have this part sticking out. And just keep your sketching loose. Don't worry about creating an exact copy. This is just your doodle. Here at the top, we can add some of these things. And then a rectangle at the top. And we can add these shapes that you see in the picture. But yeah, it doesn't have to be exactly the same. You can let parts out. Then for those screws, or whatever they're called, we can just make these simple semicircles. And then this character has like these arms. We can just go for a simple shape like this. It almost looks like a cactus. Maybe we could go even a little bit longer, add a little thingy, and then just add these squares at the sides. And well, here at the bottom, we could add some lines. And then he'll have some chains. So we'll just make like a line, circle, maybe make it a bit more rounded. So I'll go down here, then a line again, then a circle or oval. So simple oval, line, oval, line, oval. And then for the glasses, let's first make like a horizontal line like this, and then 2 of these semicircles. And we'll have little parts sticking out at the sides. Create a little arch here. So we have a simple sunglasses, and then for the mustache, we'll make a curved shape like this, and then another one on this side. You could also work with the symmetry tool in this case if you're having trouble making them equal. Yeah, something like this. This looks like a tough guy. And then again, all you have to do is lower the opacity of the sketch to like 30%, and tap the plus for a new layer on top. Go to that dry ink brush in the other library, dry ink, and then just follow the sketch lines so you get something like this. You see that I colored in the sunglasses and the mustache, and we can also add some line weight. For instance, underneath here, it's like a little bit of a shadow effect. We can also color this line in, for instance, giving some variety. Let's also turn off the sketch layer, and then we can add some extra thickness to these lines, for example, adding that variety. And also here at the top, a little bit of shadow in these little indents. Something like this. And let's also add some texture, some extra lines like this. And also on the side here. And then some highlights on the glasses. We can do that by tapping and holding the eraser to make it switch to the dry ink brush. And then we can just add some of these highlights like this. Then again, let's delete our sketch layer and then turn this layer off. Tap the plus for a new layer on top and work on our next doodle. Let's pick our Bruni brush again in the Procreate library. And we'll move on to this picture. And for this one, we are going to use our imagination a little bit. We are just going to use this as a source of inspiration. Let's first make like an oval for that lower part. It's like a donut. We'll have an extra oval here, and then from there, so it's like this, curving up, will be the neck. We'll curve it like an S shape, like this, and then here it'll attach. So we'll have another S shape, and then here we'll have the head. Let's just make a little oval for now. So here we have that floaty, and then we need to attach the beak. Let's make a curve like this, then go down. So I'm really loosely using the picture. It's more like a source of inspiration than like a true reference. So we have this beak, and then we'll curve like this, and then add an eye over here. And then of course we have that mouth, so we'll have a line like this. And the bottom of the beak is black, so we can fill that in. Add a pupil, maybe a little like eyebrow. Then we can make our lines a bit clearer. Here we can add an extra curve for that inside. And we could turn this line into dashes. We'll just do that later. And we'll have some dashes over here because you have like those little stitch lines. I hope you are having fun creating your own doodles so far. If you want to create more cute stuff, then I think you will really like the tutorial that has dropped this week at Patreon, in which we will create this super cute kawaii fruit. As always, I will guide you through all the steps. Everything is provided. And at Patreon, you won't just find this tutorial, but 250 plus more. So that's enough to keep you busy for a while and to help you get your Procreate skills to the next level. So I think it's the perfect gift to give yourself. So check it out. I will leave a link for you down in the description and it would be great to see you there. But now let's continue. I think something like this looks good. Of course, you can play around with the size of the bottom part or the size of the head. You can exaggerate that. And then once you're happy with your sketch, you can lower the opacity again by tapping the N, setting it to 30% or somewhere close, and then tap the plus and go back to that dry ink brush in the other library. And then let's just start with this curve upward to the head. And here you have that beak. Little pupil. Smile and then color this in. And then this curve downward, some stitch lines or a little fold, and then for the bigger part, I like rotating my canvas to make it easier to create these big curves. Sometimes you need to use multiple tries. That's a great thing about working digital, of course. And then over here we have this line. Can make that a little bit thicker. And then here we can go for more like a dashed line. And then another dashed line through the middle. You can make the dashes vary in length. Play around with that a bit. Then let's turn off our sketch layer so we can play with the thickness of the lines a bit. We can make the line at the bottom a bit more thick. Something like this, and maybe this part. I like the parts that are like at the bottom, the downward parts. You can make those a little bit thicker. And we need that little eyebrow. Maybe some stitches here at the front. I think that's nice. And yeah, let's also add a little highlight to the eye. Maybe we can make the pupil a little bit bigger. Then pick the eraser and add these little highlights. And maybe also a little highlight on the beak. And as you can see, this is not a copy of the photo. It's purely an inspiration, a guide to get you started with your doodle. And doodles, they don't need to be perfect. They can just be playful and fun. Then let's make another one. Let's turn this off. Let's remove the sketch layer. So we have 3 doodles now. Then let's tap the plus for a new layer and go back to that brownie brush in the other library. I found this photo online and I thought it would be perfect for a doodle. I especially like the little skull here. So let's start sketching. Of course, we have the ball at the top. So that's a circle. And then you can create a curve for that hammer thing. Curve like this, and then a curve like this. And then we can connect these and then add a shape like this. Then over here, I'd like to make that skull bigger since I like it so much. So we're not following the reference exactly. You can make a big skull here. So a big circle, teeth like this. And then we'll add that. Yeah, what is it? The handle. We can add a wider part here, then go down some more and create a bigger part here. And again, in this case as well, you could use the symmetry tool if you'd like it to be like perfectly symmetrical. But it can also be nice to have it a little bit messy, a bit more playful. And then here we have that rope, little string. We can add that here. And we'll create big eyes for the skull, two smaller ones, smaller dots for the nose. And let's just add 4 teeth. So that would look like this. Then again, we can turn down the opacity to around 30% and tap the plus, go back to that dry ink brush in the other library, and then start following the sketch. In this case, for that ball, you can just use the quick shape. So draw a circle, hold your pen in place, tap one finger on the screen, and then create that ball. You can also tap circle here if you need to move it around a bit. Go for something like this. And then tap the brush to continue. Now let's create that skull. Doesn't have to be perfectly round. You have these teeth. And then those big eyes. Color them in. I like making one a little bit bigger than the other. Makes it playful. And the nose like this. And then just follow the rest of the lines like this. As you can see, I added some diagonal lines to the string, but we can add some more. For instance, we can color this part in. And at the same time, let's also turn off the sketch layer. We don't need that anymore. And let's color this. It's nice to have some bigger areas that are colored. It brings a nice balance to the doodle. And let's also color in the ball. Let's just drop in the color like this, and you can move the threshold a bit in case you get some gaps. And I filled this area as well. You could also go along some of the edges to make it a bit more solid. Now let's also add some line weight to the bottom parts, and also here maybe there's a little bit of a shadow like this. And then let's add some texture, like some lines on this handle, just some dashes and maybe some horizontal ones here. Then we'll switch to the eraser to add some to the darker parts and also on the ball. You can see the highlights in the picture. We can use those as an inspiration. So we can add some lighter parts here, and I'm following that curve of the ball. And also there is some highlight here. So just something like this. And let's also go along the curve a bit here, just to make a clearer separation between that hammer and the ball. I think it looks pretty cute. All right, for our last one, let's delete our sketch again. So we have 4 doodles now. Let's go to the 5th, turn this one off, and go back to our Bruni brush in the other library. And for this one, I have this camera. Let's turn it in a really happy little camera. These are simple shapes. So we can start with a rectangular shape for the top, then make these diagonal lines, attach these, and then make the front like this. This is basically the shape of the camera. I'd like the corners to be a bit more rounded. That'll make it look more friendly. Then here in the center we have a square, but this one as well, I'd like it to be a little bit rounded. And then with another square in the center. Then we have this square. And again, you don't have to put in all the elements that you see. And we can make them a lot more simple. So this can just be a simple circle. And maybe this is a circle with another one inside. We don't have to add any text. Let's create this edge. And I don't want to create the slit. I just want a little face here. So let's create a mouth like this with teeth and a tongue. And then these bean-shaped eyes. Of course, you can go for all sorts of expressions, but I like this. And we are going to color that in. And then here we can create that rainbow. So just some of these lines. Then diagonal lines like this, moving to the front. And down here. I'm just going for 4 instead of 5, but of course you can vary that. We could make this one a little bit bigger. So this is it. Let's lower the opacity of this sketch to around 30%. Tap the plus and then go to our dry ink brush again in the other library. Dry ink. And again, follow all the sketch lines like this. Now let's turn off our sketch layer and let's color some parts in, like this circle and this square and this one. And as you can see, you don't have to create solid lines everywhere. Here I created a dashed line to make it like less solid. It's like a it's like a curve, so it doesn't need a solid line. Then let's create some texture around here, just to add some interest. And then let's switch to the eraser to create some highlights. You can see a highlight there. Let's just do something with that. Add some highlights here and also here. And for the eyes, we need some highlights to make it extra cute. Then we can go back to the brush. We can add some weight again to some parts, like shadow areas. And maybe make this one a little bit thicker. Like this. And then you have a super happy Polaroid camera. And you can delete your sketch layer. To remove this second window, you can just slide like this. And if you like, you can put all your doodles on one layer. Let's first duplicate these. Let's slide to the right, selecting them all, then drag them onto the canvas. So we have duplicates here at the top. And then let's just turn those top ones on, select them all, then go to the Move and Transform tool, set it to uniform, make these doodles a little bit smaller, place them about there, and then we can go to the Move and Transform tool again, but then select one layer each time. And then you can move these around. And perhaps you'll have to make them even smaller than they are. Let's go to this one. Every time you go to a different layer, you could also rotate them a bit until they all fit nicely on one layer. Maybe they could be a little bit smaller. You can just select them all again, go to the Move and Transform tool, set it to uniform. And this way you can organize them all on one layer if you like, of course. Rotate them a bit. I like that. So which one of these is your favorite doodle? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to share your results, and I would love to see you next time for the next tutorial. Thank you for watching.